Right, welcome to Live, Lead, and In Between, a podcast for leaders who want to be better at leading life and everywhere in between. My name is Travis Jones, and I am the host for this podcast. I want to say thank you for joining me today, this morning, tonight, whatever time you're consuming this. It's morning for me right now. It's rainy morning as well, and you'll have to excuse my voice a little bit. I think I am contracting that, the fabled summer cold. So I'm kind of working through that a little bit. So, if you hear me, or like, I have tried to record this like probably 3 times and I've sneezed every single, time and had to start over. So hopefully I'll make it through this one without a sneeze or something like that. But, again, wherever you're joining us from, I want to say I appreciate that. Appreciate you listening. And if you find this content helpful, you enjoy it, whatever, you can subscribe wherever you're consuming it at, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, whatever. That would help us out greatly. And I say us, but it'd help me out greatly in getting the word out there, because we, when it comes to marketing podcasts, word of mouth and kind of sharing is typically the way it goes. Most of the podcasts that I've found have found me that way. Someone will recommend, or I'll just search on a topic. So this podcast is a leadership podcast, specifically from the perspective of ministry, though the content is completely transferable to the secular world as well. But we're in the summer, and we're kind of, I solicited some topics from people. I said, hey, what would you like to hear about? What would you like to, kind of work through? And I got one that really struck a chord with me. And I keep looking over to the side because I'm looking at my other screen, and I'm looking at the question or topic that I got. But it struck a chord with me because I've lived this out. And the topic was, I'm going to read you, I reworded it so it would be a little better for this context. But it's a question, and there's a lot behind this question. It says, how do I let things go when I get no traction or engagement from those that I lead and serve? Now, I have lived that out, and it is frustrating when you don't have traction, and you don't get traction with those you lead or serve, or you try to do something like that, and you do want to just let it go, right? And so today we're going to talk about that. First thing I'm going to say right off the bat is you don't let it go. This is if you let it go, then you're going to wind up picking up all the things and doing them yourselves, and that's not what we're called to do. We're called to delegate and let others do ministry. We're as ministry leaders, we're not to do all the work of the ministry. We're to equip and allow other people. So you don't let it go. And the reason you don't let it go is because that's not what you're supposed to do. And it'll make sense as we kind of walk through it. So we're going to walk through why leaders get no traction, or at least from my perspective, what I've noticed, what I've lived through. No traction or engagement when we're putting out something or trying to do something. And I'm not just talking about it's a slow start and then traction happens, but I'm like, no traction, right? We're going to talk about that. And we're also going to talk about what to do about it. And then kind of we'll see where it goes from there. But so the only way I know how to do this is to actually tell a story. And it's a true story, as my stories are. And it involves me. And it was about a time, both within ministry that I served in, that I didn't get traction, and an epic fail at the same time. And they both had one to do with the other. So when I first started in ministry, I was a children's minister for about 5 years. Enjoyed it, ministry to little people, and it was great. But when I first started, I came out of the secular world, and man, I had just a ton of ideas. The church I served at was going through a building campaign, and we were actually renovating our old sanctuary and all the stuff with the building. So we were mobile for a while. And I started part-time, and I just started dumping ideas out, and we had momentum, and things were happening. We were averaging 100 to 150 kids on a Sunday during our mobile phase. And then when we went back from being mobile, we started to try to do more events for children and things like that, because we had the facility to do that. It was a little bit difficult to do it while we were mobile. Not impossible, but a little bit difficult. And so when we got going, the ministry was still happening, about 100, 150 kids on a Sunday in our new facility when it opened up. And that was before I even had like the children's part of the facility opened up. We were kind of working through some other stuff, and it wasn't like exactly like we wanted it to be, but we were still engaging people in the community. And so I remember thinking, man, now it's time to probably do some events. Let's do some events and bring some of the kids, out rather than just on a Sunday. And so I got to thinking through that, and the senior leadership said, "Hey, we're not doing VBS currently because we just came back, but we'd like to do a summer thing, like a nighttime thing." And I said, "Okay, that's a great idea." So I had a thought, an idea. I said, "I know a guy. He's an evangelist, children's evangelist. He'll be kind of expensive because he brings like a whole set with him, a couple $1,000s." I said, "But we can get this guy," and which is, by the way, a couple $1,000s is a lot in ministry, but we can get this guy. He'll come and we'll promote it. And it'll be a community and children's ministry type thing. And they agreed, cut the check. The day came, the guy came, set up. It was like a Saturday afternoon, or I can't remember the exact time frame, but we positioned it such. And we were ready to go. We were ready to have a ton of kids. And turns out he shows up to do his thing. I had 10 kids. 10 kids show up. That was it. 10 kids. The parents dropped off the 10 kids, didn't even stay, because this was designed to be more of a family type thing. But 10 kids, that was it. And man, I was disappointed. The senior leadership was also slightly disappointed too, because we had did this planning and we just didn't have the traction around that event. So we didn't have the engagement or the traction, and we spent money. And that was like one of my first like epic fails in ministry, was this event. And then shortly thereafter, we weren't getting a lot of traction in the children's ministry. Though we had 100, 150 kids on a Sunday, I was having problems getting volunteers for the area, right? So, it became like children's ministry is, you have to really be called the children's ministry, because if you're not, that can be super frustrating and super, I'll just say super frustrating. But I didn't have the volunteers, and we had got to a place where we got to design a new children's area, how it was going to flow, and I got to think through all that stuff. And we were open, and we just weren't getting the flow. And it got frustrating. It got really frustrating. I mean, we had one group of kids, like an age group that was coming in, and we had a lot of them, and I would always struggle to meet that need. Couldn't figure out why. And then one day I just said, you know what? I am going to stop what I'm doing. I went to my senior leadership, said, I'm going to take a couple days. I'm going to go to a coffee shop for a couple days, take my notepad, and just see if I can figure this out while we're not getting the traction. And first day, it was great. I was just sitting there. I was doing what I normally do. I was writing down tons and tons of notes. And then, I realized I was just doing the same old thing. But the morning of the second day, when I was at this coffee shop with my notepad, looking about all the notes I had written, all the potential things we wanted to do, the vision behind it and all that stuff, it dawned on me that I had yet, and I say yet, and even before this, I had yet to ask God what the ministry was supposed to look like and how it was supposed to be structured. And I know that's not super profound, but I hadn't asked. And so I set my pen down. Pencils are for people that make mistakes. That's a joke. I set my pen down, and I asked, I said, God, what's it supposed to look like? And over the next hour, he just kind of downloaded some things in my mind, and I began to write those down. And so I looked at it, I took it, and then I began to implement it. And not only did he give me like a structure for how to organize the children's ministry, how it was supposed to function at the church for that season, but he also gave me a way to how to filter out things that weren't supposed to be a part of it too. And it's a really good filtering system. It's a little bit longer of a filtering system, and maybe I'll go through that in a different podcast. But nonetheless, he gave me that, and then when I began to implement it, my goodness, did I get traction. I got tons of traction. I had probably at the end of it, before I stepped out of children's ministry, I had a huge and solid volunteer team that was very felt like family in how we functioned, which was awesome. Before, we kind of didn't have that, and there were some other things that went into play with that. But I had traction. We had traction. We had the right people and the right seats on the bus, and we had the structure that God wanted. We had traction. So I said all that to say this. One of the reasons that leaders don't get traction with what they do is they didn't ask God what it's supposed to look like for where they're at. There are times where leaders will step into a position, and the thing that they've inherited has a decent structure, and they'll try to work within that. But again, that was the structure that God had given the person that was there, and they need to still ask the question, what does it look like? What does it look like now that I'm in the seat? What's it supposed to look like? Based off my passion, my strength, all that kind of stuff. And so the reason we don't get a lot of traction sometimes is because we neglected to ask God what it was supposed to look like. So, what do you do about it? You ask. You ask him, and then do what he says. Because if you ask, he'll tell you. It may take some time to actually download that information to you. Like, I mean, I was there for 2 days, well, I wasn't solidly there for 2 days. Although, I mean, it was a coffee shop, so I probably could have done that. But I was there. I was there for it. And it took that amount of time before I got the download. And then it still operated long after I stepped out of the children's ministry. It continued to operate that way until a new leader came in. When the new leader came in, they went right to asking God what it should look like. And it changed. It changed based off what God was telling that leader it should look like. And it's thriving and flourishing even now. So we don't get traction because, well, we didn't ask. The other reason we don't get traction is because we're not passionate about what it is we're doing. People can read that. If you are not passionate about what you're doing, or feel called to do what you're doing, or you've inherited something or been given something and it's not really you, then people are going to pick that up and you're not going to get the passion out of them because you've been faking it. Now, I'm not saying that's happening with this case, but you have to ask yourself, am I passionate about what I'm doing? Because if I'm passionate about what I'm doing, people will pick that up and people will get excited about it. So there's nothing that can't be accomplished if you're both passionate about what you're doing and you've asked God what it is you should be doing, and those things line up. It's an explosion. So how do I let things go? You don't let things go. You ask God what it's supposed to look like and make sure you're the one supposed to be doing it, and then you do it. Because if you let it go, there's going to be people that are going to miss their opportunities to serve, all these things. There's tons of stuff that are going to be attached to it. So I guess that's a good answer to that. There's probably more to that. I will say that when you feel like you have no traction, what you tend to do, and I did this, like I would look for solutions in myself and I became the solution rather than allowing other people to come up with solutions to let it go. And the reason I became the solution was because I didn't really have a good understanding of what it was supposed to look like anyway. So I was doing it on the fly. And when I had a good understanding, when I had asked God and when he had said, this is what it's supposed to look like, and I did it, when I had a problem that popped up, I had already communicated to the people that are around me, this is the thing we want to see happen. And I used to have this saying, at the end of the day, this is the one thing we want to have happen in here. If there's a problem, and I would go to somebody and be like, hey, we've got a problem. So-and-so didn't show up today. We've got like 30 kids that are a part of this group. What are we gonna, and the solutions would just pour out of the people that were serving there because they fully understood that the goal was to make this thing happen. The how necessarily didn't matter. We just need to make it happen. And they did. So it's a good question. How do you, what do you do when you get no traction or engagement? You ask God why, and then you do what he says, because it will make all the difference in the world. So, I think we're going to stop it right there because I think I've answered that one fully. But again, don't let it go. Don't let it go unless God says let it go. Because the how do I let things go is a frustrating comment. You're like, how do I let it go? Because I don't want to hold it anymore. Well, you don't. You don't. You go to God and you say, God, what's this supposed to look like? And how am I supposed to do this? And he'll give you the answer. And a matter of fact, I still have my notebook from that spot. Let me see if I can grab it real quick. I still have my notebook from when I was writing this stuff down, and it became such a thing that I kind of kept it because it was really, really good, and how God kind of gave me what I was supposed to do. Yeah, I still have it here when I wrote things down. So, and you'll wind up keeping that stuff. So, with all that said, though, I think we're going to stop with this particular one. There will be a couple of special deliveries that are going to come out fairly shortly. We're going to be talking about spiritual gifts, things like that. So, like I said, thank you for joining me today. If you have any questions, comments, or protests, I usually point to someone else for the protest, but I got no one else to point to except for me. So if you have any questions or comments, you can leave them in the comments section. There's also an email address for Live, Lead, and In Between in the show notes as well that you can actually email me directly. And if you have a topic that you would like to have talked through and discussed on Live, Lead, and In Between, shoot a comment on there or shoot me an email. I'd love to kind of work through it and think through it and talk about it because I think it makes everybody stronger. I know I enjoy this a little bit when I get that kind of information. Yeah, there you go. Finally got it right. So anyway, with that said, this has been Live, Lead, and In Between, and I would encourage you to lead well in everything you do. Be blessed.